Chapter 151. The air in the warehouse crackled with the tension of Valeriana's ultimatum. She was no longer a suspicious bureaucrat. She was a general delivering terms of surrender. Silas stepped forward. His posture deceptively relaxed. Director. Dealt with accordingly is a strong phrase. We are hunters. Same as you. We've been solving problems this city's official channels can't handle. Problems you seem to create. Or at the very least, magnetize. Valeriana retorted, her gaze still locked on Kaelen, an E-rank with an ability that defies categorization, a guild that consistently operates at the epicenter of anomalous events. I am not a fool. Silas. There is a connection, and I will have the truth. Kaelen met her stare. The truth is the city is safer than it was a week ago. Isn't that the association's goal? Control is the association's goal. Lyra said from the shadows, her voice cold. Safety is just the selling point. Valeriana's eyes flickered to Lyra, then back to Kaelen. You have 24 hours to report to my office for a level 5 debriefing. Failure to comply will result in the immediate suspension of all Obsidian Star licenses and the issuance of arrest warrants for every member. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving a void of silence in her wake. The war for the Veil had just acquired a new, official front. Chapter 152. There is no level 5 debriefing. Dorian said over the secure comms. That's a code. It means black bag operation. They're not going to debrief him. They're going to dissect him. They'll take the warehouse apart bolt by bolt. Then we are not going. Silas stated flatly. We go to ground. We have the Bastion. The Bastion is a fixed location. Lyra countered. If they find it, they can lay siege. We'd be trapped. Then we don't let them find it. Jack said, uncharacteristically serious. We disappear. We become ghosts. Kaelen listened to the debate, his mind working. Running was an option, but it was a losing one. It would cement their status as rogues, forcing them to fight both the association and the sovereigns. They would lose any chance of working within the system to effect larger change. There's another way. Kaelen said quietly. All eyes turned to him. We don't run. We expose them. He explained his idea. It was even more audacious than hijacking Alistair's signal. They would use the association's own bureaucracy and pride against them. Chapter 153. The plan was a high-stakes game of public perception. They couldn't fight the association head-on, but they could make it too costly for Valeriana to move against them. They reached out to their network of mid-tier guilds, starting with Goran of the Crimson Howl. The story they spun was one of bureaucratic jealousy. They portrayed Valeriana as a power-hungry director threatened by a small guild's innovative stabilization techniques. Techniques that were saving the city money and lives. They hinted that she was inventing pretexts to seize their proprietary methods. To the other guilds, it was a believable story. They all chafed under the association's control. The idea of a director targeting a successful small guild resonated deeply. Simultaneously, Dorian, using his labyrinthine knowledge of the association's digital infrastructure, began leaking carefully curated, non-classified data. Performance reports showing the drastic drop in city-wide anxiety. Mana purity charts from the aquifer. All evidence of the miracles. But stripped of any connection to Kaelen. Framed simply as the results of Obsidian Star's contracted work. They created a paper trail of success and a narrative of persecution. They were building a shield made of public opinion and bureaucratic inertia. Chapter 154. Valeriana's response was swift and brutal. On the morning of the deadline, a full squad of association enforcers, elite hunters who served as the organization's internal police, surrounded the warehouse. Silas, Kaelen, by the authority of the Hunters Association, you are ordered to surrender for questioning. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Inside, the team was ready. This was the confrontation they had anticipated. Remember the play. Silas said, checking his axe. No resistance. Absolute compliance. Let them be the aggressors. They walked out of the warehouse with their hands raised. The enforcers, clad in stark white armor, moved in to restrain them. It was at that moment that the spontaneous protest arrived. Dozens of hunters from the Crimson Howl and half a dozen other guilds converged on the street, led by a loudly indignant Goran. "This is an outrage. Valeriana." Goran bellowed. Cameras from independent news outlets, tipped off by Jax, recording everything. "You're arresting the people who saved downtown? Is this how the association rewards success?" The scene descended into chaos. The enforcers were surrounded by angry, camera-wielding hunters. Valeriana, watching from a command vehicle, saw her clean operation turning into a public relations nightmare. She had to back down. Forcing the arrest now would cause a revolt among the rank-and-file hunters. With a face like stone, she ordered the enforcers to stand down. The first battle had been won without a single blow being struck. Chapter 155. The victory was temporary, but significant. Valeriana was forced to publicly postpone the debriefing, citing a need to review the evidence. The Obsidian Star Guild was not in the clear, but they had bought themselves time and space to operate. They were now public figures, albeit minor ones. The plucky underdog guild persecuted by the big, bad association was a powerful image. It came with a new kind of scrutiny, but also with a layer of protection. Kaelen learned a vital lesson that day. Power wasn't just about mana cores and shadow armies. It was about influence, narrative, and the ability to make your enemy's actions too expensive to carry out. He began to think bigger. The Bastion was a start, but it was a secret, defensive measure. To truly fortify the Veil, they needed to operate on a larger scale. They needed to not just be a guild, but a movement. The seeds of a new idea were planted, a way to not just fight the symptoms of the Veil's decay, but to address the cause. Chapter 156. The cause, as Dorian had long theorized, was humanity itself, or more specifically, humanity's collective despair, fear, and negativity. These emotions were a low-grade fuel for the anomaly, thinning the Veil and making it susceptible to tears and phantoms. The Bastion's calm aura proved it. By purifying the ambient emotional energy, they were actively strengthening the world's defenses. What if? Kaelen proposed to the team. We didn't just wait for fissures to form. What if we could proactively generate positivity? Create a feedback loop that actively repels the anomaly? It's a nice thought. Lyra said skeptically, but you can't force people to be happy. Not force. Kaelen said, amplify. The Bastion does it passively. What if we could create beacons, places of refuge, art, community, things that naturally generate the kind of energy that heals the Veil? It was a shift from being firefighters to being gardeners on a civic scale. They would use the Genesis seed not just to cleanse, but to inspire. Their next target wouldn't be a dungeon, but a place of profound human sorrow. Chapter 157. They chose the Old City Memorial, a park dedicated to the victims of the first eclipse a decade ago. It was a place of powerful, stagnant grief. The emotional residue was so thick it was almost a physical presence. A perfect feeding ground for the anomaly and a prime location for a new fissure to form. They couldn't just plant a seed here. It was a public space, too visible. Instead, they devised a new approach. Under the guise of a community restoration project funded by a network of sympathetic guilds, they began renovating the park. They hired artists, gardeners, and community organizers. Jax, with his infectious personality, became the public face of the project, organizing volunteer days and memorial concerts. Kaelen worked behind the scenes. During the renovations, he used his reflective insight and Warden's authority to subtly cleanse the emotional residue, not by erasing the memory of the lost, but by transforming the grief from a sharp, painful wound into a gentle, honoring sorrow. He was a psychological surgeon, healing the city's soul one memory at a time. Chapter 158. The effect was slower than the Bastion, but more profound, as the park transformed from a dreary monument of loss into a vibrant, living space for remembrance and community. The emotional energy shifted. People didn't just visit to be sad. They came to remember, to talk, to heal. The energy generated was one of resilience and connection. Kaelen felt it through his connection to the Veil. The fortification percentage, which had been crawling upwards, saw a noticeable jump. Veil fortification, 2.1%. They were creating a new kind of structure, not a bastion of power, but a sanctuary of memory. It was a proof of concept. They could fight the war not just in the shadows, but in the hearts and minds of people. The Memorial Park became a symbol of the city's recovery. And Obsidian Star, quietly, was at the center of it. Their public approval rating soared, making it even harder for Valeriana to move against them. They were winning the war on a front no sovereign could ever comprehend. Chapter 159. Their success, however, did not go unnoticed by the other side. Deep in a corrupted pocket dimension, a being that called itself the Harbinger took note. It was a sovereign whose domain was despair, a creature that fed on the very emotions Kaelen was now cleansing. The sudden, localized strengthening of the Veil in the human city was an anomaly, a blight on its feeding grounds. The source was traced back to the Memorial Park, and to the guild that had renovated it. The Harbinger did not send an army. It did not launch a complex plot. Its methods were simple, direct, and brutal. It reached out with its consciousness and touched the mind of a single, vulnerable individual standing in the newly renovated park. A man who had lost his entire family in the first eclipse and had never recovered. It poured a concentrated dose of pure, undiluted despair into him. Chapter 160. The man, whose name was Evan, screamed. It was a sound that tore through the peaceful ambience of the park. He clutched his head, his eyes rolling back as a torrent of forgotten agony, magnified 1,000-fold by the Harbinger's power, flooded his mind. The beautiful flowers around him withered and died in a 10-foot radius. The cheerful chatter of visitors turned to screams of confusion and fear. The very stone of the memorial cracked. The sanctuary was under attack, not from without, but from within a human soul. Kaelen, who was nearby, felt it immediately. A spike of corrosive energy so potent it felt like a physical blow. He saw Evan collapse, a vortex of black despair erupting from him, threatening to unravel all the good work they had done. This was a new kind of enemy, a psychic poison pill planted in their midst. They couldn't fight it with blades or domains without destroying the host. The war had just evolved again. The sovereigns were no longer just attacking the world. They were attacking the hope that was healing it.